The church and crime and punishment is the last piece in our jigsaw puzzle for crime and punishment in the medieval period. And what we've got to decide is, did it help or hinder? And you know, part of this is actually a little bit of your own opinion about capital punishment. Now, those of you who are particularly clever will be able to take into context the age that they were living in, and not just judge it through the prism of our own experiences. But the church, or the church courts, never gave the death sentence. Now, we don't give the death sentence in England, but that's only happened since the 1960s. America still gives the death sentence, and so do many other countries. And the fact of the matter is, we can afford not to give the death sentence now, because we put people in prison, and our tax system now allows us, and our wealth as a country allows us to be able to afford to do this. The Anglo-Saxons didn't have that luxury. They had to give punishments that were not so expensive as prison. So in that context, maybe the church was a hindrance by not giving the death penalty, and therefore giving more lenient punishments. Though you might fall on the other side of the coin and think, well, although the church disagreed with what you would call the rest of crime and punishment, anything that's not church you call secular. That's a good word for you, actually, if you can use this in your work. So if it's to do with the church, it's an ecclesiastical thing. If it's to do with not the church, so literally everything else, it's a secular matter. So the church may have got in the way of secular crime and punishment, but it was a benefit, you could argue, to crime and punishment, to the system, that they were unwilling to give the death penalty in a time where it was so unreliable to actually know whether somebody was guilty or not, and they just didn't have the means to really find out very sure whether somebody had done a crime or not. Well, there's another thing which it's very easy to argue they helped, and that is with keeping the power of kings in check. The big example is Henry II. Henry II abused his power, probably, to take advantage of a situation and send, well, this is arguable, well, some knights went to go and smash the head in of Thomas Becket, who was Archbishop of Canterbury. Now, because of the church courts, and because there was a crime against the Archbishop of Canterbury, the most powerful person in this country, in the church punished the king, and he was whipped, and he had to walk through the streets without any shoes on. Now, without the church courts, it would have probably been the case that the king could have done what he liked. And the kings were so powerful in the medieval period, at least the church was keeping some sort of control of the kings and the king's power. But of course, the church did provide loopholes to people. Because they gave more lenient punishments, which may be a good, maybe a bad thing, it did allow people to get away with things. Because if people could get to a church that offered sanctuary, they could avoid being tried in the secular courts, be tried in the church courts instead, or choose after 40 days to leave the country. Now, leaving the country might be seen as somebody escaping justice, or it could be seen as punishment enough that they have to go live somewhere else. I don't know. Perhaps more likely it's a way of somebody escaping justice. And they also did trial by ordeal until 1215, which clearly was a ridiculous aspect of crime and punishment. And they did the trial by ordeal in secular and in church courts. A priest had to be present, but it didn't matter which court was doing it, so that their hand was in both there, and the trials were stupid. You can tell they were foolish. That's why they were got rid of in 1215, because they even saw partway through the Middle Ages, medieval period, that it was ridiculous, and it wasn't actually telling you whether somebody was guilty or not. So there you go, a bit of information about the church and the impact they had on crime and punishment, whether it was hindrance or help.